Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Lipstick and Lore. Today I'm going to be your host into the spooky, unsolved, conspiratorial, and historical stories that plague my mind and now have to plague yours. Today's case is that of the Doodler. So the month of June is Pride Month, so I decided to do a case that represents the injustice that people of the LGBTQ community face on a daily basis. And while we have come leaps and bounds from where we were since this case has taken place, it does not mean that there isn't still injustice today that needs to be talked about and recognized. So I thought this was a good time to do this case in specific. Also, sorry for the lighting. There's a tree outside my window, and Mother Nature does what Mother Nature will do, and I'm not going to fight around it. So if this bothers you, you can skip ahead. But without further ado, enough of my yapping, let's get into today's case. And handing it right back over to Voice Over Me. So today's case takes place in 1947 in the city of San Francisco. The summer of love had come and gone, the hippie movement had become subdued, and most of them traded in the attitude for their drug habits. All the while, the city of San Francisco and the U.S. as a whole grew darker. The police had just caught the zebra killers, ending their month-long reign of terror. But on the city's western edge, a new killer decided to go on a spree. That killer was dubbed the Doodler. The Doodler is an unidentified serial killer believed to be responsible for between 6 to 16 murders and 3 assaults. All of the murders took place in the city of San Francisco between January 1974 and September 1975. The unknown serial killer was dubbed the Doodler for his habit of sketching his victims before attacking them. So they would find sketches, or witnesses will say that he drew a picture of them before attacking them. He met all of his victims in gay bars or nightclubs, and the suspect was described as a black man between 19 to 25 years of age. He was said to be about 6 feet tall with a slender build. He stabbed his victims in the front and back in similar locations on the body. All the victims were white males, all presumed to be part of the LGBTQ plus community. Police believe that all the victims would go home with him or would meet up with him willingly and then get murdered in the spot that they were found or the spot that they went to with this guy. It was really hard to find information about this case. I had to go through a lot of different sources to find facts about these murders. So I'm going to go over the confirmed ones, though he is believed to have part in 16. Police could only confirm so many, and a lot of his victims are still unidentified, and police hope to identify them with genetic genealogy, which we talked about in my last video. So hopefully one day this case will be solved, but as of right now, these are the confirmed murders that we know of that can be linked to this person. So at 1:57 a.m. on January 27, 1974, a body was found at the water's edge and San Francisco's Ocean Beach. The body belonged to Gerald Earl Cavanagh. He was 49 years old and a Canadian-American immigrant. He had been stabbed multiple times in his front and back. He was found fully clothed and lying face up, and he had defensive wounds suggesting that he had fought his killer. He was originally unidentified and dubbed John Doe No. 7, but was later identified due to genetic genealogy. The second victim was Joseph J. Stevens, age 27. He was discovered on June 25, 1947, by a woman walking along Speckles Lake. Stevens had been murdered not long before he was found. He had been seen at the nightclub the night before. He was employed as a female impersonator, which, let me tell you, I had never heard the term female impersonator before. I had to look up what that even meant. It's just a drag queen. He was just he was just a drag queen. Um and I just thought that was kind of funny. Not funny because obviously people are dying, but female impersonator was just kind of funny to me. I mean, it is sort of what it is, yeah, but I just have never heard it be called that. But yes, he was a drag queen and a comedian. Investigators believe that Stevens had gone to the lake willingly and wasn't moved there after death. So he believes that he met up with this killer at the lake, which wasn't uncommon, especially in the 70s, for people who were a part of the LGBTQ community to meet up in sort of secret spots because it wasn't as like accepted then, and it really was sort of frowned upon in a lot of places, so they would often meet in secret. So this wasn't too like out of the normal, because at first I was like, well, why would you meet somebody at a lake somewhere like after just meeting them? But I learned it was pretty common for the LGBT community to meet in sort of secret places. The third murder was Klaus Akin Christmann. He was 31 years old, and he was a German-American immigrant. He was discovered by a woman walking her dog on July 7th, 1947, and he was found at Ocean Beach. His death seemed to be more violent than the previous murders. He had considerably more stab wounds, and his throat had been slashed multiple times. He was found fully clothed. Unlike the others, Christmann was married and had children, but witnesses and people who knew him said he frequented gay bars and had dabbled in cross-dressing. He had also been found with a tube of makeup on his person when he died, which I'm not saying wearing makeup makes you gay, because it doesn't. Um, but that's just what investigators assumed, and people did say that he probably was a closeted homosexual, like people who knew him. So I'm not like saying that, oh, he was definitely gay. I'm just saying that that's what witnesses and people who knew him alleged. So don't quote me on that, but that is what I could find, and it would fit in with the other sort of victim profiles. Now on to the fourth murder. In January 2022, investigators identified another victim, 52-year-old Warren Andrews, a lawyer for the U.S. Postal Service, which I also learned the U.S. Postal Service does not play around about like their legal stuff. Like if you mess around with someone's mail, the Postal Service, like it's really crazy. I went down a rabbit hole. They take this stuff very, very seriously, okay? Do not mess around with people's mail. He was found in Land Ends on April 27, 1975. Andrews was found unconscious but breathing shallowly. He had been beaten with a rock and a tree branch. Despite being raced to the hospital, Andrew would in fact pass away. He never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead 7 weeks later. Now on to our fifth murder, which was Frederick Elmer Kappen, 32 years of age. He was discovered on May 12, 1975. He had been stabbed like the other victims, dying from strikes on his aorta, which is the biggest artery in your body, and I just learned this because um, we had to do some like medical stuff for in my family, and I didn't know what it was until then. But I do know it is the largest artery in your body, and it sort of like connects everything, so it's very important, and it would be very detrimental if it was like broken or punctured or anything like that. So I can't imagine how like that would have felt. It probably would have been excruciating. Investigators determined his body had been drug about 20 feet due to a disturbance in the sand. He had served in the Vietnam War in the U.S. Navy, earning various medals. Now on to our sixth murder, which was that of Harold Gullberg, 66 years of age, a Swedish-American immigrant, discovered on June 4th, 1975. His body was mostly decomposed. They thought that he had been decomposing for roughly 2 weeks. He was found in Lincoln Park, San Francisco, and his underwear was missing and his pants were unzipped, which was different than the other murders because they had been found fully clothed without their clothes being disturbed. Which I don't really know how they determined his underwear was stolen because, like, he could have just been going commando. You know? Like, he could have just not been wearing underwear, so I actually don't know how they determined that he wasn't wearing underwear. I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you. But he was believed to be the Doodler's last victim. He was also the oldest of all the victims, but after this, the Doodler pretty much went radio silence, and police had virtually zero leads. So, with no leads and really nowhere to turn, just a rough description and a police sketch with a body count that was rising incredibly fast, police sort of scrambled to figure out who this person was. They interviewed witnesses, they talked to victims who had survived that were basically just assault victims, not murder victims. They went around to the local gay bars and interviewed people who worked there. They interviewed family and friends of the victims, but nothing to report. Eventually, after a lot of searching and a lot of digging, they did find a possible suspect and brought him in for questioning on the murders. However, this man was never charged, mostly in due part to the three assault survivors not wanting to out themselves in court or in an official statement. The suspect cooperated with police but didn't confess to the killings, so officers at the time strongly believed that this suspect was responsible for the crimes, but without any proof or any witness statements, they couldn't charge him with anything, so he was never tried or convicted of any of these crimes. To this date, as far as I could find, the suspect has not been publicly named, and very little is publicly available about the crimes or investigations, though this case is still ongoing and open till this day. Throughout the years, police go ahead and continue to appeal to the public, asking anybody who knows anything to come forward, but obviously, as time passes and years pass, it is very difficult for witnesses to come forward. It's very difficult for evidence to be, kept, and it's very difficult for cases like these to be solved. But hopefully, with the advancement in forensic technology, we can solve it, just like in my last case, the boy in the box, where he was finally identified. I hope that all of these victims can be identified as well as the perpetrator, because these are murders that are so, like, they're so textbook serial killer, and they really didn't get a lot of publicity from what I can tell. This was probably due to the fact that all these victims were part of the LGBTQ community at a time where that was not something that was widely accepted, and even in today's standards, it's not always widely accepted. There is a large group of people who still think that um, gay marriage and, LGBTQ rights and pride are harmful to our society. So that's probably the biggest reason this didn't get a lot of coverage, and also the biggest reason why there's not a lot of information, because even though investigators did go and interview people at the gay bars and nightclubs, a lot of them probably didn't want to talk, or at least didn't want to like go on record and speak, just because they were afraid of outing themselves to friends or family or people who knew them, and a lot of them probably feared like not being able to work places, because there was a lot of places and still is a lot of places that will not let you work there if you are part of the LGBTQ community, and it's probably one of the biggest reasons that a lot of these witnesses did not want to come forward. And I can only hope that they come forward at some point and give their sides of the stories, and that this case will be eventually solved. Investigators have come out and stated that they hope, with the advancements in forensic technology, that this case will one day hopefully be solved, and they have also given many statements saying that this case is still being looked into and it is still an open and active investigation. They gave an interview in 2022 saying this, and I think they gave another one in 2024, if I'm not mistaken. So I will link all my sources down below in the description. If you want to go fact check me, feel free to do so and let me know if I got anything wrong in the comments, of course. I want to talk a little bit about the aftermath of this case, because it did get some publicity. I'm not saying it didn't get any. It definitely did get some, but not nearly as much as a lot of the other cases, like Ted Bundy, the Zebra Killers, the Roadside Stranglers, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, which, if there's any of those cases that you want me to cover, or any cases in general that you want me to cover, please let me know in the comments down below, because I am always looking for new case suggestions. And you can also let me know on Instagram. It is linked in my bio, so you can let me know over there. And also, if you have any questions about any of the cases that I post, you can also leave those in the comments. I really appreciate talking to you guys, and I really appreciate this little community that I'm building on my corner of the internet. So feel free. I promise I'm not scary. I don't bite. So just let me know in the comments down below. In the short aftermath of these crimes, an activist by the name of Harvey Milk, which, by the way, I'm sorry, Harvey Milk is such a sick name. I love that. Milk as a last name? That's sick. I appreciate that greatly. Harvey Milk was the first openly gay man to be elected into public office in California, which, my goodness, I could do a whole video on Harvey Milk. I had zero idea who this guy was, went down a rabbit hole, learned a lot about him. Um, he is not only an activist, but like sort of a a path paver, if you will, for the gay community. And I could do a whole yap sesh about this guy. Truly and deeply I could, because he not only was the first openly gay man to be elected into office in California, I think he ran like 2 terms or something like that. And he also like spoke out, and he took place in one of the very first like official pride parades. He's a really cool guy. I could do a whole video on him. Let me know if you guys would be interested in that, because I could yap about this man most definitely. But he spoke out about this case, and he expressed empathy for the victims who refused to speak out with the police. He said, quote, "I understand their position. I respect the pressure society has put on them," end quote. Milk elaborated that the 3 men likely feared damaging relationships with families and possibly ruining their ability to join the workforce, citing that 24 to 25% of the 85,000 gay men in San Francisco were in fact closeted. Which this really got me thinking about the fact that this case probably could have been solved if it were people who were straight, because if so, then those witnesses probably would have spoke out. But due to the stigma and hate around a different sexuality that isn't heterosexual, it was not solved and witnesses didn't come forward. And that just really breaks my heart. And I think a lot of people, because I went in a lot of like Reddit threads and things when looking for this case, because I had to like dig deep into the archives of information. But a lot of people were saying like, oh well, it's such a good thing that this doesn't happen today. So that really got me thinking like, but it does happen today. So I went through and gathered some stats about LGBTQ crime and things like that against people of the LGBTQ community, and like the effects it has on mental health due to the stigma and hate that still happens today in the big 2026. I think people forget that homophobia and racism and sexism still happen today. I think people forget that these things still exist. They're not just something that existed in the 70s or in the 60s. They are very much still alive and well today. And the more awareness we bring to them, I think the better off we are. So I'm going to go ahead and give you some modern stats, because I think people often forget that homophobia and sexism and racism do in fact exist today, especially homophobia, and I think people forget, like they think Pride is this really fun thing to go to, which it is. I recommend everyone goes to Pride at least once in their lives. But I think more so it's important to show people of different sexualities that it is okay to be you, and that it is, there is safe places for them, because homophobia is not a thing of the past. It is very much still alive and well today, and the more awareness we bring to it, the better off we are, because if you pretend something doesn't exist, it doesn't go away. It just festers. Like if you have mold and you let the mold sit there and you just pretend it doesn't exist, it's only going to get worse. If you're sick and you just let it sit there and you pretend it doesn't exist, it's going to get worse. So I think the more activism and the more attention we bring to it is the better, because you can have flaws. I'm not saying you can't have flaws, but you need to be able to want to educate yourself and change these flaws or change these mistakes and educate yourself. I think ignorance is not your fault, but it is your fault if you're being willingly ignorant. So that's why I want to give you some stats about homophobia in today's world, because I think a lot of people forget that it's still happening. I saw a lot of people talking about how this would never happen today because homophobia isn't. It is. Homophobia is very much around, and it happens on the daily. 47% of transgender youth report bullying. 17% of them report it has caused them to skip school, which is a alarming amount of people to feel unsafe enough through bullying because of who they are to not want to go to school anymore. 15.3% of LGBTQ adults in the US report being hate crimed at least once in their lives. And that was reported by the CDC. And that is crazy because, first of all, why are we out here just hate criming people? And also, those are only the ones that have been reported. I can't imagine how many have not been reported on. Like, that's crazy. The GLAAD reported 31 transgender people were killed in the US in 2022. In 2021, hate crimes motivated by sexual orientation increased 12% since 2019, with 11,249 victims reported, which I can't imagine how many like aren't reported. That's the thing about reported numbers is there's probably a large percentage of people who don't report it, especially with things like hate crimes due to race or sexuality or gender. And it's the same thing with like people who are rape victims. A lot of them aren't reported because a lot of people fear not being believed or fear the judgment and stigma that comes with that. The CDC reports 29% of LGBTQ youth attempt suicide. This is 4 times higher than regular youth. So, LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to try to commit suicide or successfully commit suicide, which is absolutely heartbreaking because suicide in youth is already a huge problem. Like, that's just a huge issue, especially in the United States. And the fact that LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely just shows that homophobia isn't a thing of the past. It is, in fact, still very prominent to this day. In 2022, 6.3% of LGBTQ adults in the US were physically attacked due to their sexual orientation, reported on by the CDC, which is also like there's no reason for that. I mean, there's no reason for attacking anybody physically, period, but especially not over something as simple as sexuality, like just loving who you want to love. The HRC reported as of 2023, 28 states passed anti trans legislation restraining healthcare. This can be gender affirming care, this can be like health complications due to being transgender, and this is also basically that if a transgender person went in there and said, "Oh, I want to change my pronouns from he to she," it is within the doctor's right to basically deny that. So, 28 states have passed anti trans legislation and restricted healthcare, which is crazy that we're restricting healthcare in general. It's the same thing with like, um, abortions and things like that. That is healthcare. So I just don't understand why we're restricting things like that, especially when a lot of this is life saving, and you know improves the quality of life. Also, gender affirming care doesn't always have to be like strictly for transgender people. Um, like when you get your like chest reductions, or if you get like chest implants or anything of that sort, that is also gender affirming care. A lot of plastic surgery is considered gender affirming care. 86% of LGBTQ individuals live in states with no explicit anti LGBTQ related discrimination laws, the HRC reported on as of 2023. And 45 states have at least one anti-LGBTQ laws, the HRC also reported in 2023, which this has probably gone up due to a variety of different reasons, but mostly our presidency in the US right now. And it is just crazy that we are in the year 2026 and we have all these advancements in society, and yet we still have states that have anti-LGBTQ laws. And there is still states that have influences of, the Jim Crow South, which I think is even more crazy. And it just shows that all these issues that we think are behind us aren't really behind us. And I think the more we turn a blind eye to it, the worse they're going to get. And I think it is very important to advocate for these people, advocate for oppressed groups, children, minorities, the LGBTQ community, the people of color. It's always just we need to advocate for these things because they aren't behind us. Like, most definitely are still prominent. I mean, the civil rights movement only happened in like the 60s, which is not that long ago. Like, it really isn't when you think about it. So just because we don't have, just because slavery is illegal now, and, gay marriage is legal in most places now, doesn't mean that homophobia and all these things don't exist. And I think we need to just stay aware of them and really realize that if you see something, say something, and speaking out is important. And speaking out doesn't ruin your aesthetic, it doesn't ruin, you know, you as a person. And if people don't like that you're speaking out, then those are not people you need to be around, because speaking out is important and it's a cool thing to do. And I hope that I do a good job of doing that here on my little corner of the internet. And if I'm not, please let me know. But I try to bring awareness to things that I am passionate about, and this is one of the things that I'm passionate about. And I think it is something that needs to be spoke about. So I spoke about it. So I hope that I did it well. I hope I told this case well, and it didn't have a lot of info, so I apologize that it's a shorter one, but I still thought it was important to talk about, especially in June because it is Pride Month. So I hope for all my LGBTQ people out there that I told this well and I did this well, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Handing it back over to Outro Me. And that is all I have for you in today's case. I hope you enjoyed it as much as you can enjoy a true crime video. And once again, go outside, touch some grass, meet beautiful Mother Nature, hug your pet, hug a family member, do something that brings you joy. Your mind will thank you. As someone who consumes far too much true crime, you gotta throw a little good in there sometimes, restore your faith in humanity. And as always, let me know your comments, concerns, and critiques in the comments down below. And be kind, be safe, and be yourself. And I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I love you all. Bye bye.